KSL News Radio.
Is that drink worth it to you? It's an article in the New York Times that breaks down the latest science on alcohol in the body, where they looked at a meta-analysis of this is such a big word, but they analyzed 107 different studies over 40 years, which revealed that no amount of alcohol improves health. None.
Which surprises me a little bit because I thought I had heard for years. I'm not a drinker myself, but I certainly am aware of this. I thought red wine had the antioxidants, and in fact, they were even saying that it improved health. And this latest study, the analysis says, no, that's not true at all.
To walk us through it, we spoke yesterday with Dr. Tom Miller, Chief Medical Officer at the University of Utah Health, and he said, unequivocally, no amount of alcohol is good for your health.
With this study, it shows pretty definitively, it's a meta-analysis of many past studies, that drinking is not something that you do for your physical health.
But there's also a lot of things that we don't do for our physical health. I know the amount of Diet Coke I drink is not good for my physical health, but I think what was interesting about this was there was this push, or said that this discussion of, a little moderate drinking can even have health benefits. And what they're saying is we want to squash that.
When you drink Diet Coke, it doesn't give you a buzz, though.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't make you woozy. It doesn't put you in a situation where if you get in your car and drive home, you could be pulled over for driving erratically, or, you could potentially get a DUI. And in fact, the New York Times, in reporting in this article, says that last year, Ireland became the first country to label alcohol, saying that there's a direct link between alcohol and fatal cancers.
So they're putting a label on it, just like cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Randall Carlisle, a good friend of Dave's and mine. We worked together at Channel 4 for years.
A long time.
For a long time. We were just, I used to anchor with you, fill in for Kimberly Perkins. It was.
Yeah, you were telling me that I was sort of a jerk to anchor with.
I've got stories. I've got stories. You've got stories too. You're now the Media and Community Affairs Director at Odyssey House, and I know you've been through a lot.
I'm
alcohol.
a recovering alcoholic.
Yeah.
I was a functional alcoholic for 40 years. And you see a study like this, and it's like, alcohol is a poison as opposed to your Diet Coke. I don't think there's any poison in Diet Coke, but alcohol is a poison. And we had some discussions at Odyssey about this because the Deseret News interviewed one of our people. And the problem with seeing a study like this is if I'm I am a recovering alcoholic, and if I'm a heavy drinker or an alcoholic and I see a study like that, it probably is not going to deter me from drinking. Just like so many people that come into Odyssey House who are addicted to fentanyl know full well, because they've read all the articles about people overdosing and dying, and they're still doing it. And so I don't know how this may deter my mother, who's 97, who drinks a glass of red wine every night because she thinks it's healthy. But I don't think it would deter somebody who's an alcoholic.
And I think that's where it's tricky, and it's a little bit scary because you can have a glass of red wine and probably not, upend your life. No question. There's a lot of people that drink responsibly. But can you speak to the fear, or maybe how scary it might be to go from the occasional drinker, the moderate drinker, to the abusing alcohol?
Well, it's a progressive disease. And I started out in college just having fun at parties and things like that. And alcoholism runs in my family on the paternal side. And I knew that. And then it just became a daily occurrence. And then it just increased over the years. And I never was, and you know me, you worked with me, Deb. I never drank in the daytime. I was always sober and very alert.
You're so sharp.
Doing newscasts.
You were bossy, sharp and in control.
And a jerk. Okay.
Occasionally.
A pro, I would call it a pro.
I do have
yeah.
some stories, but we'll talk about those off air. No, I loved you as a colleague, Randall.
Same here.
You always
Same here.
had as the main anchor at Channel 4 News for a long time.
Long time.
You were our newsroom leader, and you did have a lot of younger reporters that you were shepherding around. You
were a wet behind the ears reporter when you first started there, but and I was a perfectionist, and that's probably why I came off as a jerk.
Why did you drink? Was it to?
I drank to that was my go-to for any tough emotion I had to deal with. So, like if I got off the air at 10:35 and somebody said that was a terrible newscast, I would use that as an excuse to go home and drink. Or if we had a great newscast, I'd say, "Hey, let's go out and celebrate." So I used drinking as a go-to or if I was having a problem with a girlfriend or a wife. It was just my go-to for decades to just numb my emotions so I didn't have to deal with it.
I'm so fascinated to listen to your journey because I think so many of us can, whether it's alcohol or food, there's some sort of addictive behavior that we can get caught up in. What was it and that changed for you?
You mean when I finally got sober?
Yeah. Because you're right. You've read the articles. I mean,
I'm not a
know all
dummy.
of this,
You're
right?
reporting on them.
Yeah.
Even though my brain has shrunk because of drinking.
Literally, right?
Yeah, literally. What it was is alcohol is a depressant, and towards the end of my drinking days, I just kept getting more and more depressed, and I used to go out to bars and drink with friends and yuck parties and stuff like that. And towards the end, I was drinking by myself in my condo and getting more and more and more depressed. And I remember thinking, do I want to live the rest of my life like this? And at one point, I just said, I've got to do something about this, but I am an alcoholic and I need help. And I checked into an intensive outpatient program up at Uni, Huntsman Mental Health now, and went through that program twice, and I've been sober for 13 years now, so I haven't had a drink.
Amazing. You're amazing.
Incredible.
Can you stick around, Randall?
Sure.
In the light of this article that came out from the New York Times about alcohol and no amount of alcohol in analysis of more than 100 different studies over 40 years, no amount of alcohol has any health benefits. We've been talking live with former Channel 4 and Channel 2 news anchor Randall Carlisle, recovering alcoholic, also is a media spokesperson for Odyssey House here in Salt Lake. And I want to ask him in just a moment about this trend toward mocktails and like non-alcoholic beer, which appears to be catching on, particularly among a younger crowd.
Yeah, near beer or O'Doul's. There's some non-alcoholic drinks that have been out for a long time. But I saw something from Gallup. They did some research on this, and the percentage of Americans who consume alcohol has largely stayed the same over the past couple of decades. But there is one group, ages 18 to 34, where it's dropped by 10%, largely because they are starting to favor these non-alcoholic beverages, the mocktails or the zero alcohol beers.
And Randall, in fact, I'm reading a blog from Stanford University, and they said the sale of alcohol alternatives are growing by 20% every year. What are your thoughts on this for people who don't have an alcohol abuse problem and maybe are turning to these as replacements?
I think to me it's a great movement by society. When I was in college back in the 60s and 70s, everybody drank, everybody smoked pot, everybody got high. And now, with younger people deciding that maybe that's not the way they want to go, to me that's great, and it's becoming more acceptable to like maybe meet in a bar and drink a non-alcoholic beer or a mocktail. And I don't know, Deb, you and I had been at a whole bunch of TV station parties or just get-togethers after, say, a 10 o'clock newscast. And if one of us would have said, I'm not drinking tonight or something, everybody else would have thrown shot glasses in front of you and said, come on, drink up and everything.
Yeah, it's like the crowd just starts cheering you on.
Yeah.
It was so the idea that you can go into bars now and get a mocktail instead.
I just think it says it's going to remove some of the stigma that I grew up in. If you go to a bar, you get drunk. I mean, it was just that's just the way it was, you know. And if younger people are doing this, more power to them. Will it make a difference for somebody who is an alcoholic? Probably not. Just the same thing I mentioned earlier. I mean, fentanyl kills, but people still do fentanyl. So, you know, just because if I'm an alcoholic and I want to get high and I go to a bar that's advertising non-alcoholic beer, I'm still not going to buy the beer, the non-alcoholic beer.
So you're not convinced by marketing.
No.
You have to be convinced by admission.
Right. You have to admit that you've got a problem and you want to deal with it, and then it's great to have that accessible.
Some of the reasons that are given because people are starting to use more non-alcoholic options is because they just don't want the drawbacks, the hangover the next morning. It's like, oh, I can still go out, have a good time with my friends, be social, but I'm not going to be struggling the next morning. And that's a real win for a lot of these young kids.
Sure it is. I remember I woke up for decades. I'd wake up in the morning with a headache and a dry mouth and sort of shaking. And I just have to get over that. And then I went to work sober, and I waited till the next night after the newscast to drink again. You know, and it wasn't pleasant. I enjoy waking up in the morning now, and I'm feeling 100%. You know.
How is your life now, 13 years sober, compared to the life you were living with alcohol?
I'm so much happier. I'm more peaceful. I care more about other people. If you'd anchor a newscast with me now, I wouldn't be the jerk I was back then. And it's not because I was drunk. It's just because you have this mentality that just keeps going, that is blaming other people for everything. I don't do that anymore. My problems were my problems, and I've dealt with them. And I don't have to lie or cheat or anything else. So I can wake up feeling good about myself. And the biggest difference when people find recovery is they learn how to love themselves. And that's something I never did, regardless of, I was a TV anchor man, and people said, I watch you every night and everything, but I never loved myself. And I do now. So
I will tell you, so when I started in the business, it was back in 2001. It was at Channel 4. I was one of your editors. It was just a video editor. Okay. It was just for a brief time. But I will say it shocked me when I heard your story. When I heard that you were an alcoholic, that you had been a functioning alcoholic, because I'll tell you, I had no indication.
Right.
When we worked together, I had absolutely no idea. Of course, I remember when you stepped down from the 10 o'clock news, one of the things I have always remembered is you took everybody, all the editors and photographers and behind-the-scenes guys, and said, hey, listen, come out to the bar. Drinks are on me as much as you want. And even though I'm not a drinker, I thought, boy, that is so incredibly generous. But then when I heard you share your story about the addiction and the struggles, I just thought, I had no idea, Randall. I had no idea.
Well, I'm glad.
How many people did it take for you to finally have an idea telling you you're an alcoholic?
Well, I went through 4 wives, and they all told me I was an alcoholic, and my response, and that was the hardest thing for me to admit. I hated that word, and so my response was, I'm not an alcoholic, I just drink a lot. And
that's how you justified it.
Yeah, and I said, furthermore, I make a pretty good salary as a TV anchor. I take very good care of you, so don't bitch at me. I mean, it was. I know that's terrible to say, but that's
Justifying.
it. My mind has changed so much with sobriety, and I always blamed all of them for my divorces, and now I realize that it was probably 99.9% my fault, and I'd be a much better husband now. So you want to get married, Deb?
Let's go say I do. Yeah. Well, thanks.
We're
That's
matchmaking here on the
it's
show,
so,
folks.
so romantic of you to ask me.
Deb, will you marry me, please?
Randall, thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
You know, we love you. I mean, you're just a great inspiration, and everything that you did for the Channel 4 squad, the four of us, the reporters, Paul Murphy, Chris Van Oker, Scott McCain, and myself during the early days in the 90s. You were a true leader, and we didn't know. You covered it well, but we're so glad you've turned everything around.
Well, Odyssey's slogan is "We are recovery, and recovery is possible."
Randall Carlisle, thank you.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.